Most people have very little contact with the law. But in fact, laws control our daily lives in many different ways. They help society to run more smoothly. Most of us never break the law, except when we commit minor offences.
Up until we're 16, we're mainly sheltered from the law because we're under our parents' supervision in most things. And at 16, still we have very little choice, but we can get married with our parents' consent.
There are specific laws that apply to us at our age. Like, we're only allowed to look after other children when we're 14, but I don't think many people really take notice of that law. You can get married with your parents' consent at 16, but if you want to get married without their consent, you have to wait till you're 18. Laws affect us a lot, really, but we haven't got the right to do anything about them and change them until we can vote when we're 18, really.
We have to go to school, or have full-time education anyway, until we're 16. We're not allowed to have a full-time job, and only some part-time jobs at 13.
What's your attitude towards the law and law enforcement?
Well, in this country, law enforcement, I think, is handled very well because policemen are more caring than in other countries where I've lived.
I think mainly it's very good. Generally, they treat people of our age with some respect.
Policemen don't go around with guns in their pockets on duty, unlike some other countries like France.
In our country, I think it's quite good. I agree with the fact that we don't have capital punishment, and I think policemen are far less aggressive here than in many other countries. But I think on the whole we have a good enforcement system here, but it's not perfect.
What do you think about the image that the police have in the media?
It's very stereotyped. In comedies, they're sort of very stupid people with silly hats on who say hello, hello, hello all the time.
I think that sometimes in the news we're not told quite the full story. Sometimes the police are possibly in the wrong, but we're not told because it's going to give them a bad image.
In soaps, particularly American soaps, they love shooting people and they're the heroes, and they, if someone's trying to run away, they simply shoot them.
I think it's difficult to see from the media what our policemen are really like.
I spent a day with Police Constable Dave Simpson. He's the local policeman in part of North Oxford. He's been in the police force for 20 years now, but he hasn't always been a local bobby. He's also worked in the city centre and in the traffic division. He patrols his beat on a bicycle, and he sometimes patrols on foot too. This seems like a very quiet neighbourhood, Dave. What do you do when you patrol here?
Normally on patrol here on pedal cycle, as with the rest of my patch, keep an eye on who's about. You do get the odd nuisance caller and also the possible burglar who's looking for what might be to him an easy target.
Dave's beat, or patch as he calls it, covers a very wide area. It includes suburbs, a shopping centre, villages and even a wood. He deals with many different kinds of crime on his beat. In the suburbs, burglary and car thefts are the biggest problems. In the shopping centre, he deals mostly with cases of illegal parking and shoplifting, and he sometimes has to help if there's an accident. When I asked him what the worst part of his job was, he told me that it was informing the families of people who'd been killed or injured in accidents. Here in the woods, he's a long way from those problems. He doesn't often come here, but he told me that it was one of his favourite parts.
This part of my beat is different in that it's very quiet. There is no through traffic, no cars or lorries, no shops and very few people. And the only people that are here are those that want to walk the woods, again for the peace and tranquility and to get away from it all. And it's very nice.
Another part of his beat is the village of Whiteham. I asked Dave whether any serious crimes ever happened here.
Not really, it's usually very quiet. I sometimes have to tell motorists to slow down as they drive through the village, as the roads are quite narrow, as you can see. I usually come to the village once every 2 days. Normally I call in at the farm at the end of the village. And I always call in at the post office, as that's the best place to get any local information.
Morning, Dave.
And a cup of tea as well.
Yeah.
All right, and you?
Not so bad.
Kettle on?
Yeah, I can put it on. Do you want to hold JR for me?
Oh, thank you. How's family?
Fine, thank you. How's yours?
Oh, keeping well, thanks.
What's this place, Dave?
This is a large expanse of common land which is known as Port Meadow, and as you can see it spreads right across to Oxford City, and it is used by commoners to graze horses and cattle. In the winter it's normally, as it is now, very quiet apart from the cattle that are on here.
Are there any particular problems or crimes that you find here?
There's very little crime on the meadow itself. You do, believe it or not, still get the odd occasion of horse rustling.
Horse rustling?
A very old-fashioned
People
crime.
stealing horses?
Yes, or just moving them. Again, people think that the horses aren't being looked after, and in fact they are. But there again, the people owning the animals also govern it and patrol it. And if anything is amiss, they contact me.
An important part of Dave's job is to keep in close contact with the communities that he looks after. That's why he travels around on a bicycle and not in a car or on a motorbike. On a bike he can stop and talk to people more easily. And there are some parts of his beat that he couldn't get to by car. There are quite a lot of boats along the canal here, Dave. What kind of people live in them?
We've got a complete cross-section of people up here. We've got some young men that live in boats on their own and some boats with families in. They might be people that at the time might be out of work. We have some people that are self-employed and also some people that work within the city of Oxford, but they prefer to live on their own barges, and this is what they do. They live on the canal at Wolvercote and work within the city.
Do the boats stay here all the time?
A lot of them are here from between 3 to 6 months, and then they might move either because they have a project as a self-employed person, or holidays, of course, they can go off.
Dave Simpson doesn't race around in a fast car, and he never carries a gun. His job is about preventing crimes rather than catching criminals. And his most important weapon is contact with the local people. It may be a long way from the world of the TV cop, but that's the day-to-day reality of being the eyes of the law.
We're only allowed to look after other children when we're 14.
We're not allowed to have a full-time job. We have to go to school.
I usually come to the village once every 2 days. In the winter, it's normally, as it is now, very quiet.
He hasn't always been a local bobby. I asked him what the worst part of his job was. I asked Dave whether any serious crimes ever happened here. He told me that it was one of his favourite parts.
I sometimes have to tell motorists to slow down.
Electricity. What would life be like without it? Take a look at this kitchen. It's full of electrical appliances. Here's a fridge. There's a freezer underneath. Here's an electric oven. This is a microwave. There's a radio, a coffee maker, an electric toaster, an electric hob, an electric kettle. And there are all the lights too. All these things need electricity. And that's just the kitchen. What about all the electrical appliances that can be found in the rest of the house? We all use a lot of electricity, and yet only a small proportion of electricity is used in the home. What about all the electricity that's used in shops and offices, and for things like streetlights and trains, and most of all, in factories? All the things that we buy need electricity to make them. But what's wrong with that? After all, electricity is clean. It doesn't cause pollution. Well, using electricity doesn't cause pollution, but making it does.
Most of the world's electricity is made by burning fossil fuels. That's coal, oil and natural gas. This power station, for example, here is burning coal. It's really a gigantic steam engine. The heat from the coal makes steam, and the steam is used to turn the generators. At the moment, generating electricity like this is the cheapest way of generating electricity. And up to now, the world has had very good stocks. But of course, that situation may change. I mean, it's likely, for example, that in 50 years we may have no more oil. When you burn fuel, you make waste gases, and those waste gases pollute the air. Carbon dioxide, for example, traps the sun's heat and is slowly warming up the Earth. Scientists call this global warming, or the greenhouse effect. And some power stations give off a gas called sulfur dioxide, and that makes rain acid. And acid rain damages forests, it damages buildings, and it's poisoning lakes and rivers.
So, with all those problems from fossil fuels, what about nuclear power? Is that any better?
Well, there is, or there should be, no pollution from nuclear power because the nuclear power station is not burning any fuel. It's also a very high energy source. A little bit of nuclear fuel, perhaps that big, gives as much energy as all the coal you could put in a great big truck, a great big lorry.
So why do some people not like nuclear power?
Well, there are two big problems with nuclear power. One is that when the nuclear fuel has lost all its energy, it has to be taken out of the reactor, but it's still giving off radiation. And that radiation will last for hundreds of years. So it has to be stored somewhere very, very safe. And of course, you have to build and design and look after nuclear power stations with extra care, because if you have a disaster, I mean, it really is a disaster.
Well, what about hydroelectric power then? Is that better than nuclear power or fossil fuel?
Well, it has two big advantages. I mean, there's no fuel to pay for, so it may sound as though the energy is free, and of course it doesn't cause any pollution. So those are big advantages.
So what are the disadvantages?
But what are the disadvantages? The energy isn't free because the dams are very, very expensive to build, and of course it involves flooding an area, and that area may be home for plants and animals and humans. And again, the dams have to be built to very, very high standards, because if there's an accident, people's lives could be risked if for example, a dam bursts, as indeed happened in Italy several years ago.
Right, okay. So those are the ways that are used at the moment then, hydroelectric power, nuclear power and fossil fuel. But we hear a lot today about alternative means of energy.
Well, one of the most common has been used for centuries to do other jobs, and that's windmills. I mean, they've been used for hundreds of years. But today they can be used for generating electricity. We have solar energy. That means solar cells, for example, which turn the sun's energy into electricity. Rather like the solar cell you get on some small calculators. Or also another way of using solar energy is to use a gigantic mirror and to focus the sun's heat and use it to boil water.
Now, presumably the big advantages of those forms is that they don't cause pollution.
That's right, yes.
And also the energy source is free.
That's right,
So
yes.
with those advantages, why don't we use them?
Well, one of the problems is actually getting enough energy from them. I mean, if we look at windmills, for example, the wind does not carry much energy, not compared with coal, oil or gas. If we take a power station like this, to get the same energy from a windmill or a site of windmills, you would need hundreds of windmills. And they're expensive to build, and they also happen to be very noisy. Solar power, again, it's very difficult to get large quantities of energy. So what it comes down to is that at the moment, fossil fuels give us plenty of energy, all the energy we want, and the alternatives are often expensive to set up. And although they have no fuel, there's no fuel to pay for, if we go for those, the cost of electricity will probably be more.
Electricity can be produced cheaply with nuclear and fossil fuels, but at a cost of polluting the earth and the air that we breathe. There are cleaner alternatives, but these would make electricity more expensive. Would you pay more for your electricity if it would reduce pollution? Every choice has its price. Think about that the next time that you switch on a light or play a video. It's difficult to imagine life without electricity. But what price are we prepared to pay for it?
And the steam is used to turn the generators. They've been used for hundreds of years. It has to be taken out of the reactor. The dams have to be built to very, very high standards. Today they can be used for generating electricity.
Electricity can be produced cheaply. Welcome to Minster Lovell Hall. Today, it's just a ruin, but it used to be a very grand house. The Lovell family used to live here. Many strange stories are told about this place. Every Christmas, the Lovells used to have a big party here. One Christmas, a long time ago, Lord and Lady Lovell had the hall prepared for a special celebration, the wedding of their eldest son, William, and his young bride. During the party, the guests decided to play a game of hide and seek. The young bride went away to hide, and after a while, the bridegroom and the other guests tried to find her. But they couldn't. They looked for her all night, and the next day, Lord Lovell had the whole house and garden searched. But the young woman was never found. William never recovered, and he died of a broken heart. Many years later, a new owner had the attic of the house cleared. One of the servants found an old wooden chest. When they lifted the heavy lid, inside they found a skeleton. It was wearing a bride's dress. William's bride had hidden in the chest, and when nobody had found her, the chest had become her tomb. Today, people say that these ruins are haunted by the ghost of William Lovell. On dark nights, you can hear his cries as he still searches in vain for his lost bride.
I believe that the girl could have disappeared. I believe that they could have found her skeleton, although it could well have been a hoax. But I don't believe that they heard screams or ghostly wails or anything like that.
There's the thing about people hearing the voices, and that I just don't believe that at all.
Do you believe in ghosts?
It's a difficult question. I'm not really sure. At the moment, no, not really. But I accept other people believe in ghosts, and I think it's possible.
I don't believe in anything which can't be explained scientifically and mathematically.
Have you ever seen a ghost?
When I was about 7, I thought I saw a ghost, but it was actually, I think it was my reflection in the window. I'm not quite sure, but I was very, very scared at the time. And because it was midnight and I'd just woken up, so I don't actually believe that it really was a ghost.
Can you give any examples of mysteries that can't be explained very easily?
Well, the Loch Ness Monster up in Scotland, that's an old legend, I would say, more than a mystery. But nobody knows whether it's there or not, but I don't think it is myself.
And also there's the Yeti and Bigfoot in America, and people that all claim to have seen these phenomena, but I don't believe them.
Monsters, ghosts, we're all fascinated by mysteries, by the unknown. But the greatest unknown isn't the past or the present, it's the future. We'd all like to know what's going to happen to us in our lives. And we try to find out in lots of different ways. Probably the most popular way of telling the future is horoscopes. There are 12 different birth signs: Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn. Your character and your life depend on the position of the stars when you were born. You can find horoscopes in many magazines and newspapers. Here you are, look. Your stars. Sagittarius, you've had a difficult time lately, but things will get better from now on. So try and relax more and don't worry about your problems. Oh, here's Gemini. An exciting offer will come your way this week, but you should be careful. Make sure you check all the details before you accept. Well, can we rely on horoscopes? Can we rely on the horoscopes we find in newspapers?
No, not really. They are based on fairly sound principles, but there's no way that anybody could predict with accuracy for a whole 1/12 of the population at once.
So what can we learn from astrology?
Well, astrology, as done for one single individual, rather than a sun sign, becomes much, much more interesting. It shows us how that person's character really manifests. It shows us something about the childhood, the way that they learn, the way that they have relationships, the way that they are competitive, and all of these are shown by the planets in the signs.
How does astrology work?
Astrology, really, when you draw up somebody's chart, is like stopping the hands of a clock. It shows you the positions of the planets for the moment in time and also space when you were born. And so as you draw the chart up, you have 11 planets, which can be in any one of 12 signs and any one of 12 houses. And they are very specific to the time and the place that you were born. The planet itself is like an actor within us. And so Mercury, for example, is our mind and the way that we communicate. Venus is about how we find beauty and love and harmony in our lives, how we relate to other people. Mars is about how we go out and get what we want, our competitive drives. And so you look at these in the sign that they are in, which will show you something of the style or the manner in which that planet will project itself, and also the house, which will show you something about where in life you will have that experience, whether it's at home or at work, where that energy is most likely to be used.
Is there any scientific basis for astrology?
There are certainly people who've done research in a very scientific way, who have started off as being completely sceptical about astrology. And there are, of course, people in history like Isaac Newton, who was an astrologer, and who nobody would question was a scientist as well. The Gauquelins, a couple in France, have done a lot of research and have found a much higher than statistically probable average of planets on the angles. But really, to show you that, I need to draw up a chart, so why don't we do yours?
Okay, thank you.
I need 3 pieces of information: your date, your time, and the place where you were born. So
Well,
the date first.
the date of birth, that's the 15th of September, 1948,
And the time.
6 o'clock in the morning,
Right. And then the you were born.
Derby.
Just sit back and let the computer do its work. The much faster than one could by hand.
So what does this show?
All this shows is the planets for the moment that you were born. It's like stopping the hands of a clock. This is just a graphic representation of where they were, so that if you were standing on you looked at one of these planets, it would be against the fixed backdrop of that constellation. This is your sun, and as you would expect for somebody born at 6 o'clock in September, the sun is just coming up over the horizon. This is the horizon line, and this is the midnight line. And so here's your sun coming up over the horizon. It puts it in a very prominent position.
So, what does that mean?
Well, it means that despite the fact that you're a Virgo, and Virgos shy and retiring and prefer to be in the background, being useful, like some limelight as well. How you project yourself is very important to you, and you actually want to be seen in the world. You want to be seen to be somebody.
Whether we believe horoscopes or not, most of us, after all, you never know. Are you superstitious?
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody is slightly, at least. People don't, I don't know, Friday the 13th, people are afraid to do things on that day. It's an unlucky number, and I think most people don't walk under ladders. Be unlucky. I think I am superstitious just as much.
Magpie, I have to say, hello, Mr. Magpie, where's your wife? Otherwise,
What might happen?
I'm not sure. Nothing's ever happened because I've always said the rhyme.
Can you tell me the rhyme?
Okay. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told.
Now, personally, I'm not superstitious at all. Touch wood. So, fingers crossed, I'll see you in the next project. Today, it's just a ruin, but it used to be a very grand house. Every Christmas, the Lovells used to have a big party here. Lord and Lady Lovell had the hall prepared for a special celebration. Lord Lovell had the whole house and garden searched. Try and relax more. Don't worry about your problems. But you should be careful. Festivals and celebrations are an important part of our lives. They mark important events like birthdays and weddings. And they mark points in the year, like Christmas and Easter. Many festivals are based on the sun and seasons. Even before they became Christian festivals, there were festivals at Christmas and Easter. Easter used to be the spring festival, the start of a new year, when plants begin to grow. The traditional Easter egg is a symbol of the start of a new life. And there's always been a festival in winter, when we now celebrate Christmas. The old festival used to mark the winter solstice, the darkest time of the year when the days were shortest. People felt depressed, so they needed a festival then to cheer themselves up. What are the most important festivals in Britain today?
Christmas, Easter,
New Year,
May Day,
and maybe Halloween.
What are the dates of those festivals?
Easter changes every year. Halloween's on the 31st of October, and Christmas spans roughly a week, with Christmas Eve being on the 24th of December, Christmas Day being on the 25th, and Boxing Day on the 26th.
How do you celebrate Christmas in your family?
Well, on Christmas Eve, sometimes we go to church in the evening and sing Christmas carols.
Well, on Christmas Eve, in the evening, we hang up our stockings for Father Christmas to come. We go to midnight mass with all my family and relatives.
On Christmas Eve, we try to go to midnight mass and we all hang our stockings up, including the cat, and to open them the next morning.
And on the 25th, Christmas Day, we usually wake up very early, about 7 o'clock, and open some presents and visit friends and family.
On Christmas Day, we open our presents quite early. We get up at 7 and then we eat a late lunch at 3. We don't do anything on Boxing Day, really.
And on Boxing Day, we go to a pantomime, maybe.
A lot of Christmas traditions are very old, but many of them only started in the 19th century. Queen Victoria's German husband, Prince Albert, introduced the Christmas tree, and the first Christmas card only appeared in 1843. Christmas trees, cards, presents, and lots to eat and drink. With all these traditional things, have we forgotten the true meaning of Christmas?
I think it's a bit commercial. I think it's all very well getting the presents, but it's changed from being a religious occasion.
I think it's got very commercialised. Shops are just taking advantage of the fact that more people spend money because they want to give presents to each other. And the emphasis of the religion has gone, really. It's just a time for giving presents.
It used to be really only for Christians to celebrate the birth of Christ, and now hardly anyone goes to church and everyone is sort of forced to buy presents, which the shops stock up on much too much.
Not all celebrations are connected with the seasons or with religion. Some mark national events. This is the Trooping of the Colour, which takes place to mark the Queen's birthday. In France, there's always a big parade through Paris on the 14th of July. This is Bastille